Hello, everybody, and welcome to Author Showcase. This is a production of the Write-Tukubuli Virtual Literary Festival. I'm your host, Nicole Georges-Bennett, and today we will be featuring author and academic Dr. Anthony Frampton. So before I welcome Dr. Frampton officially to the program, I want to let you know that Author Showcase is a way that we can deep dive into the writing processes of our different authors of Dominican descent and learn a little bit more about what inspires them and how they came to write our favorite books. Now, Dr. Frampton is a researcher, teacher, journalist, and development worker who has held different professional positions in broadcasting, corporate, communications, higher education, and community development for over 20 years in the US and the Caribbean. In 1991, he received a diploma in television production from the Caribbean School of Media and Communication at UWI in Jamaica. In 1998 and 2000, respectively, he earned his bachelor's, major media criticism, and master's, emphasis media management degrees in communication from Ohio University. In 2014, he completed a PhD in media and communication at Bowling Green State University by researching cross-border film production. He has taught 10 different courses in communications at universities in Jamaica and the United States and has authored several research articles and 2 books. So I'm going to pause right here because I would love the opportunity to welcome Dr. Anthony, or as I know him, Bernard Frampton, to the program. Welcome, Dr. Frampton.
Nicole, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I hope that we can have a useful and fruitful discussion. Look forward to it.
Awesome. So, of course, you are an academic and you have produced many academic papers. Is there a particular paper that you would like to sort of highlight before we dive in? I just want, in case there's anyone who's read these papers, one that they might recognize.
Yes, actually, we have been working on a project to highlight the contribution of the first Black full-time broadcaster of the BBC, who happened to be Jamaican, and she sort of spearheaded the evolution of Caribbean broadcasting at the BBC. So what we know as the BBC Caribbean Service, and some of us would readily recall the Caribbean Today program. And she was actually the pioneer of those programs, and her name is Una Marsum. And we have we've written a series of articles, one already published, the other one in the works, and we are basically lamenting how she has been misremembered, forgotten, displaced as an iconic pioneer of broadcasting, not only as a colonial subject who had migrated to the UK, but also as an international broadcaster. And interestingly, following our first paper, when we started working on that paper, there was nothing available. And following that, the BBC actually did a documentary series, a documentary on her, recognizing her. So our work has already done quite a bit in terms of gaining, raising awareness about Una, and starting a process by which she can be given her due recognition. And we have received calls from universities in the UK asking us to participate in intellectual exchanges on Una and so on. So we are continuing that process, and that's the work that I think we want to leave behind in terms of contributing to Caribbean history.
Very important work indeed. So, as we can tell, you are an academic by profession. You produce academic work, research. Now, however, Bare Attitude, which is the novel that we are going to be discussing today, takes you out of that nonfiction world and into mystery, into romance, into genres that we would not typically associate with an academic by profession. So, what inspired you to take that leap into fiction writing with Bare Attitude?
That's an interesting question. I mean, if you look at my career early on, I started off very early on in theater with the People's Action Theater, long even before I got into broadcasting. And my career in broadcasting started off straight out of high school at Mapping Television, where we would produce a documentary sort of news program, which is very unique. I say that to sort of emphasize that there may not be such stark boundaries or differences between journalism, film, and television and fiction. And so, because if you look at it, the work that we were doing back then with News Focus on Mapping Television, we were actually sort of subverting the traditional notion of journalism as being purely objective. I mean, we were infusing our personalities, we were infusing a type of cultural aesthetic that was sort of new for the Caribbean, and in its sense, it was truly Caribbean because the Caribbean people we have a sort of flair of doing things, and we tend to infuse our personality, our style into almost everything we do, even if it may be a sort of an importation from the West that is telling us that we have to be objective. And so early on, and I'm going somewhere with this, so just bear with me a little bit. So early on, when we had this type of journalism, what I would consider a type of literary journalism, and I use the term literary journalism to mean a type of journalism that doesn't only subscribe to a notion of objectivity, because we do know objectivity in its sense is a sort of loose and unattainable sort of objective. So with literary journalism, you sort of accept the subjectivity, you accept the persona, you accept the messenger as much as you accept the message. And it's similar with the new journalism, which was introduced by the famous American journalism Wolf in the 1960s. And so I'm saying this to say that we have come a long way into recognizing that journalism is purely objective, and so the connection between art and journalism is more fluid than we're likely to believe. And so the trajectory for me therefore made sense. If you saw that I came from theater, moved into television journalism, and broadcasting, and we can see broadcasting as another type of literary journalism because the persona and the personality sort of foregrounds the message as well. And then you see I come in, and then I decided to write a novel. So it may not be such a stark departure from what I have developed as a career. And just the last thing I want to say on that is that it's also not that uncommon. I mean, a lot of academics and great thinkers dabble and sometimes even double up in literary works as much as in academic work. For example, take C.L.R. James. A lot of us know C.L.R. James as one of the most profound Caribbean thinkers. C.L.R. James actually wrote a novel, right, called Mint Alley, and it was the novel that propelled him into that level of academic and intellectual recognition. Let's take, for example, Aimé Césaire, the Martinican intellectual thinker, poet. He's a poet, a writer, politician, and one of the most profound thinkers, certainly from the Francophone world. He wrote a novel, Tempest. So I'm saying this to say that it's sometimes thinkers, and I would say not just academics, thinkers, and intellectuals, sometimes they are preoccupied with ideas and they're curious about certain ideas. And for them, the most fascinating way to explore them is through their imagination. And
Hmm.
by exploring it through the imagination, they're not constrained by the evidential protocols that dictate how you present information as an academic in that type of setting.
Because I was going to jump in here and say there must be sort of a juicy creativity that really appeals to an academic who, as you said, it's all about the evidence, it's all about research, it's all about facts. Whereas there is so much room for your imagination to bloom when you're writing fiction as versus nonfiction, which has to be within certain parameters. So, is there sort of a temptation to cross that boundary because it looks so much more appealing on the fiction side? Does it kind of take you away from sort of the gray halls of academia to those lush green fields of fiction?
Yes, I certainly, and certain ideas are more attractive if they're explored with a certain level of freedom. All right,
Hmm.
and we must also consider that fiction in itself is a form of knowledge, that it is not in contradiction to objectivity, or it is not trying to fit itself in an oppositional way to the knowledge that we consider to be academic knowledge. It's a different type of knowledge that
Hmm.
becomes useful. If you consider Aristotle, that notion of verisimilitude, we explore ideas, we explore the human condition in fiction as well, and through the exploration of the human conditions, bring we are able to discover certain things about the world, about experiences, about our own selves that we may not be able to discover in a sort of academic protocol. So there are advantages to looking at certain ideas and fictions, ideas and experiences through fiction.
Hmm.
And some of the greatest thinkers use fiction to help us to understand the world better. I mean, think of Wole Soyinka. I mean, think of Derek Walcott. I mean, just think
Hmm.
of some of the ideas that came out in their novels, and they themselves can posit a certain level of truth that,
Hmm.
um, again, may not necessarily be in opposition to what we consider to be academic work, but may just be a cousin to or partner to that type of knowledge.
But did your academic background stand you in good stead, so to speak, or did it actually help you when it came to approaching fiction writing? And I'm thinking in terms of because the structures are so different, right? In terms of storytelling and character development, the structure of a novel, um, it's very different from writing an academic paper. Was there anything from your academic background and experience that actually helped you when you began to write this work of fiction?
Yes, yes. I think that one of the things that helped my development of beatitude, and sort of encouraged me to work on it in a more sophisticated way than what we would probably be accustomed to in terms of Caribbean fiction. Um, I I was driven by a certain type of preparation that I had in academia, and that
Mm.
was discipline. Discipline in terms of actually ensuring that I paid attention to details, that research, that I did proper research, so that I could again follow that verisimilitude that Aristotle guides us to. Um, so yes, it wasn't an easy project. I spent, I think, an entire year just doing research. For
Wow.
example, I had no knowledge about how the medical world works, and I had to ensure that I represented Natalie's condition while she was at the hospital in a certain way that would be profoundly convincing based on the story I wanted to tell.
Mhm.
And so that took some work. Um, I didn't know much about the legal, how the courts work at the time, and so I had to do a lot of research in that area. So similarly to academia, where you are driven to ensure that you are you are providing something authentic, something well researched, something that can be defended, something that is credible, something that
Mhm.
is parent. All these things sort of they drove me to work on their attitude at a particular level, and I don't think I would have done it that way had I not been exposed to that level of academic preparation.
Well, I think we've whet our viewers' appetite enough now that if they are not familiar with Bare Attitude, now seems to be a great time to actually tell them what's the synopsis of the story. How would you summarize the story, the plot?
Well, Beatitude is basically a story about love, romance, betrayal, and tragedy. And it explores a lot of issues related to the the Caribbean experience, migration. It focuses on corruption, political the elites. It focuses on the rural versus urban dynamic. It focuses on the sense of ambition that drives Caribbean life. So Chester is a lawyer who just happened to come across um, Natalie by chance. They fall in love. Natalie had migrated from Haiti to Dominica to have a better life for herself, and she is a very sophisticated woman, a very attractive woman, um, a very classy woman. But the struggle to survive in Dominica traps her into a type of life that she can't escape from. And while she tries to help out her family, her ailing mother needs help financially, and so she has to subvert her own values to
Mhm.
do what she can to help out her mother. And so she is torn between this existential reality of need versus uh, your own beliefs.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that struggle sort of drives her into a chain of events, some of it that she had never envisaged she would have to encounter. And through it, she has mixed feelings because while she encounters love, she also encounters tragedy that leaves her in a perpetual state of uncertainty.
Right. And it is also a murder mystery at its heart. If
Well,
you know,
yes.
well, I know we don't want to give away too much. Okay. So, but what I'm struck with is that you were able to layer in so much about the societal demographic um, state of Dominica at the time that you were writing. I'm sure things have probably changed a bit now. One would hope, but you delved, like, you dived right into that issue of Haitian migration, Haitian immigration, and Haitian assimilation into Dominican society, and the conflicts and the tensions that rose out of that dynamic. And in case we have, I'm sure we have viewers who are probably not as familiar with the situation in the Caribbean, but there was a time, I believe, following that massive earthquake that Haiti experienced, that we did have an influx of Haitian refugees into Dominica. And because they also speak Creole, which is a language that we speak in Dominica, they were able to sort of meshed into the societal fabric. However, of course, as with any migrant group, I'm sure there were tensions that came up. Now, Bare Attitude does deal quite a bit with those sort of social tensions, and I'm wondering when you sat down and you started to make your main protagonist a Haitian woman, was this something that you were looking to use to address what was happening in Dominica at that time? What was your what was the motivation for including that dynamic of Haitian migration into Dominica?
Interestingly, most of it was just listening to what Natalie was telling me.
Mm.
I basically was just following the character and based off the experiences that she was having, try to feed off out of the energy that came from the previous scene. So part of it, of course, there was an underlying politics of for me to sort of unearth some of the contradictions in Dominican society, and I was particularly, I think, deliberately trying to make a statement about how we become very uh, complex when we are dealing with certain conditions that are we consider to be threatening to us. I mean, look at Dominica. There's a reasonable suspicion that there are more Dominicans outside of Dominica than there are in Dominica. Then we also have this other factual statement made by the government themselves that the the country is underpopulated. So there you have a country underpopulated. You have a society that has a culture of itself, its people migrating to other people's territories. And yet we will have this very virile tension about Haitians coming into Dominica. And I remember at the time it was very sharp and poignant to the point where people were asking for some sort of blockade of Haitians coming to Dominica.
Mm.
I thought that quite interesting. I find it a statement about the human nature, but also a comment about our post-colonial identity and how could our colonial heritage
Mm.
continue to feed a lot of our fears, anxieties, and our own reactions to things that we ourselves don't fully understand.
Mhm.
And so I was searching for a very sophisticated way to comment on that dynamic. And, there was a deliberate attention paid to presenting Natalie in a certain way. Because there was this stereotype of the Haitian migrant that we were feeding off, which is really sad
Negative.
because all migrant populations in all different ways are very multifaceted, very multivariate, and themselves multidimensional. And so there was a reason why Natalie was presented as this very stylish, chic, very poised, very demure sort of woman, so that we could sort of see ourselves and the limitations of our own imaginations and shock some of the stereotypes, some of the preconceived ideas we had about Haitians and migrating Haitians.
Do you think attitudes have changed since you wrote that book? It's been what about when was the book first published?
Off my hand, I would say the first edition probably came out in, was it 2015 or 16, somewhere around there.
So enough time that you've had to observe and probably to research how much has changed from that initial publication to now, Have things changed? Is there more acceptance for the other in Dominican society?
I don't know, and that's an interesting question, and it would be very irresponsible of me to make a sort of informed comment on that since I haven't studied it. But I
Mhm.
suspect that there are other factors that may have sort of influenced a sort of turn of opinion or, or attitude towards migratory patterns and coming into Dominica. For example, now we know that we have, I think, more than 10,000 people based on the numbers counting on the sale of Dominican passports. That we have Dominican citizens outside of Dominicans, and many Dominicans don't even know their original nationality. So this idea of Dominican being this sort of very homogeneous society, we need to revisit that
Mhm.
because from
And
policy,
even,
from
and
government,
sorry, not to cut across you, but even on island as well, that the look of society has definitely changed.
right, and even from government policy, there was a statement on changing the demographics of the country. And you don't just give people passports and think that they will never visit the country or they will never claim their rights as citizens of the country. And so that alone is a statement on whether we like it or not, things have changed, right? And then you also have to look at the reports that I'm hearing that many of the small businesses in Dominica are now owned by Haitian migrants. And
Hmm.
so you would see that there's a class sort of adjustment that's being made where traditionally we would see these people are coming in as needy people. Now they may be straddling the higher levels of the class hierarchy in Dominica, and therefore perceptions and stereotypes will naturally have to be adjusted to accommodate that new dynamic.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that you see your fiction writing as a tool for social critique.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I didn't just set out to just write because I wanted to tell a story that I found interesting. You know,
Hmm.
there were deliberate scenes placed into the book to sort of highlight some of the tacit, unquestioned aspects of Dominican life that are integral to how we see ourselves as a nation. For example, when Natalie recovers at the hospital and she is sort of cordoned or surrounded by this group of students um, who are themselves being trained, um, but at the same time providing care to Natalie, and Natalie herself is exposed to that type of intrusion. That also is a question about how we are straddling the line between traditional values and the need for to accommodate new developmental models, right? Because we had a history of having medical schools on the island. Well, how did these medical schools impact the life in the country,
Hmm.
right? So before we had Ross and those things, we didn't have to worry about having to have probably 20, 30 people you don't know examine you while you're at the hospital. But now we have to make all these accommodations because we are embracing a type of development model. So people think it's just bringing Ross, bringing medical schools, but these decisions have profound impacts on the way we live our lives as Dominicans, right?
Yes.
And how the cultural milieu begins to transform.
And it also, I think, shows just how or how not adaptable we are as a society and as a people.
Right,
to these
right.
changes. All right. Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I do want to make sure that we bring the focus back to beer attitude because that's really what this is all about. So I am going to take a few minutes now, with your permission, Doctor, to read a little bit of an excerpt from the Jamaica Gleaner, which reviewed beer attitude. Congratulations on that. That's quite the coup. And I'm going to just read a few paragraphs here. So I don't, unfortunately, I'm not able to see the author of the particular review, but just to give you a brief synopsis, it says Anthony Frampton's debut novel, Bare Attitude, is a page turner and is sure to keep you riveted. Action packed from the very first page, it is filled with intrigue, romance, power, authority, and deception, never slowing down or skipping a beat. A gripping romantic thriller, it tells the captivating story of intra-regional migration in the Caribbean through a Haitian's bold quest for economic independence and the happenings of an unlikely romance. Set on the island of Dominica, Bare Attitude highlights the experiences of the people who live there while creating a sense of native genuineness that follows the legacy of some of the best Caribbean literature. With distinct and memorable scenes, Frampton plays on his Dominican roots, taking the reader to core institutions on the island while projecting quaint fantasy but with rich and audacious character interactions. The extreme opposites in the main players, Judge Chester Detouche, a renowned jurist, and Nathalie Etienne, a Haitian migrant in Dominica who is humble yet trying to evolve, makes for an interesting love story between the two. With less than favorable conditions in Haiti, Natalie moves to the island of Dominica as a migrant worker under the sponsorship of Miguel Joseph, an unscrupulous lawyer who exploits her. Natalie, a talented artist and an unconventional therapist, smart and stunningly beautiful, becomes trapped under the clutches of the sleazy lawyer. Well, folks, if that does not make you run out and buy this book, I don't know what else will. So that was quite high praise indeed. So, Bernard, when you read that review, what was your initial reaction?
Um, I was a bit stunned
I
initially,
can imagine.
because yeah, it was coming from someone who had very little direct sort of context of the Dominican society, and they were able to appreciate so much of what I was trying to tell in the story, just from reading the book. And I felt like just from that, the book had achieved a certain level of success. So I was humbled, but I was actually stunned. And I remember going back to my room and saying, "Wow,
Yeah.
it's worked." Because when I wrote the book, I wasn't really thinking of it in terms of being transformative. I was just writing something, and I wanted to write something that I could be proud of 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I haven't marketed the book. I haven't done any marketing of the book. I think I've had 500 the book sold, and all of them have been through word of mouth. And
Wow, that is very impressive. Congratulations on that.
you know, um, so yeah, I remember reading that and saying, "Wow, Jamaica, cool, cool. That's kind of cool."
And I want to, and of the many, many accolades and, words of praise that you got from your readers and from your fans, I wanted to just pick this one out. This was in the Bare Attitude Facebook group that you put together when you first started sort of publicizing. And it comes from Maria Hernandez. I'm not sure if you were actually personally acquainted with her, but she said, the book was like a travel back in time. Love Dominica and the time I spent there. It reminded me of places and people. I think I'm the first Cuban reading this book. And with the background I just explained, it felt like a wonderful experience. Loved all the character, but mostly Kyle. Needs a sequel, I think, which would be the cherry on top. So, is there a sequel? I know that you had started on another book. I think you call it Shangri-La, and you made mention of that, but I'm not sure if that was a sequel or that was another standalone novel. So what's the story, Doc? Are we getting a sequel? What's going on?
Yes, yes, yes. I have been hounded about this sequel for quite some time, and there's some actually fans of mine who would not take it too kindly to for me saying I'm not so sure.
Oh.
No, I just haven't. The thing is, when you are straddling academia, you're straddling the literary work, and you have existential commitments with family, with just survival, and so on. You know, things are not as clear cut in terms of a plan for what's your next project. Sometimes you're so preoccupied with trying to meet certain deadlines for things that are inescapable that time just flies, and then you build a career, and then you sort of conditioned by the demands of that career,
Mm-hmm.
and then you move on to something else, and then you have family needs coming in, and so it's a very I'm sure you know that as an artist yourself, since art in itself um, is not as financially compensatory as we would like it, especially when you're a budding artist, when you're even sometimes the people who are well known sometimes struggle even to make money off their work. So for me to, for example, go into a sequel now, I have to actually get rid of a lot of things I'm doing. As
Mm-hmm.
I'm very preoccupied now in doing academic research. That would have to take a back seat. Do I want to put that project on the back seat? That's a question that
So your friends are just like, yeah, 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 yeah. Is there going to be another? That's they
most
just want the bottom line. Is there one in the future, even if it's the distant future? Is there a sequel coming?
most likely yes, and maybe not
All
on
right. So fancy there. I have secured a tentative promise for you. So I hope you're happy. So that is our author showcase for today. So Dr. Frampton, I know it's gone very quickly, and we could have delved into so much more. So maybe we will have to have you back for a part two. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing of your work and of your brilliant mind with us. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Author Showcase.
anytime, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. So look out for Author Showcase coming up as part of the Write-Tukubuli Virtual Literary Fest. We will be on YouTube. Oh, Dr. Frampton, where can we find Bare Attitude for purchase?
Their Attitude is actually available on Amazon. You just type in Their Attitude and it will come up. You'll also see the reviews, and the blurb is there. You'll be able to see whether you want to purchase it, and yeah, it's available.
All right. Of course, they want to purchase it. So buy your copy today, folks. You won't regret it. It is a fascinating read. And as much as I read it about, I guess it's about a decade ago, it stayed with me. The characters, the plot, and of course, it is about my beloved Dominica. So I guarantee that you will enjoy it. So make sure you pick up your copy today. Thanks, everybody. And stay tuned for the next Author Showcase.